So recently, a group of archaeologists were sitting in a little office in Ecuador staring at a laptop, and they realized the Amazon has been lying to us for a very long time. They were not in some fancy spaceship. They were not in a control room with 10 giant screens. It was just a small team, tired from the field, drinking bad coffee, loading in the data from a laser scan they had flown over a valley they knew pretty well. They thought maybe they would see a few mounds, a couple of shapes. Instead, the jungle turned into a city. The place is called the Upano Valley, on the eastern slope of the Andes. On a normal day, you would hike through it and see what you expect from the Amazon. Thick trees, mud that tries to steal your boots, rivers that sound like white noise when you are trying to sleep, and clouds of insects that do not respect anyone. Farmers live out there now in scattered houses. They plant a few crops, cut some pasture, hunt a little. If you did not know the backstory, you would say, yeah, people live here, but it is just jungle with some clearings. The team had spent years walking those hills, finding the usual hints that somebody older had been around. Shards of pottery where no one lives now, flat hilltops that felt a little too even, old ditches that did not quite match any modern land use. Enough to make you curious, not enough to make you scream city. That is why they pushed for LiDAR. Fly a plane in a tight grid over the valley, shoot laser pulses through the canopy, let the computer strip away the trees, and see what the ground really looks like. When the first processed images came up, they were not poetic about it. Someone just went dead quiet. The forest floor, once you peeled off the vegetation, was covered in shapes. Straight lines where the natural terrain should have been messy, rectangles laid out in rows, long embankments cutting across gentle slopes, big flat-top mounds with open spaces in front of them. If you have looked at enough maps of human settlements, your brain snaps to it fast. Streets, platforms, plazas, a city grid sitting under the rainforest, completely invisible from the ground unless you know exactly what you are walking on. They started zooming in. At the center of one cluster, later given the name Kunglins, they could trace long parallel streets, running almost straight, with smaller cross streets tying them together. On either side of those lines were hundreds of low platforms, like house foundations. Added up across all the scans and you get thousands of platforms spread over more than 300 square kilometers, with several main hubs, secondary centers, smaller villages, and roads linking all of it into a network, not one isolated site, an entire urban region. The dates hit next. You can see a city from the air, but you need dirt in your hands to know when people were there. So they took the maps into the field. Picture a team hacking through undergrowth. One person with a machete, one with a handheld receiver, one with the LiDAR printout in a plastic sleeve calling out, "We should be stepping onto a platform any second now." For 10 minutes, it feels like nonsense. Then the ground lifts under your boots. You step up half a meter onto a surface that is suspiciously flat. Trees are growing out of it, roots gripping the edges, but when you scrape away the leaf litter, you see that this is not a natural bump. It is engineered. They set up a little square with string and metal stakes and start digging. The jungle goes quiet except for the scrape of trowels. Under the roots is a layer of compacted earth. Beneath that, another layer with charcoal flecks. A bit of pottery, thick and red, with a pattern pressed into it by someone's fingers a very long time ago. In another pit, they hit post holes cut into the packed surface, round darker stains where wooden posts once stood. That is a house. A real one, not a guess. Charcoal from those layers goes in bags, carefully labeled. When the results come back, they line up in a band around 2,000 years ago, give or take a few centuries on either side. Roughly the same era when people across the ocean were arguing in Roman forums and building roads of their own. Meanwhile, in this Andean fringe valley, people were doing their own version of city life with no stone arches, no marble statues, just earth, wood, and a lot of labor. That is the part that rewires your brain. Because we were taught this simple story, the Amazon has bad soil, so you cannot have big long-term cities there. All you get is small scattered groups. Now you have clear proof that 2,000 years ago, in at least this valley, people did not just live there. They reorganized the land into a structured, planned space. The grid is not loose. It is not random. It is intentional. Imagine walking that city when it was alive. The air is still heavy and wet, but you are not fighting thorns with every step. You are on a packed earthen street, a little higher than the ground on either side. Houses sit on platforms, some with neat wooden walls and palm roofs, smoke curling out through gaps. Children are racing back and forth with dogs chasing them. There is a rhythm of people carrying baskets of maize, manioc, fruit. Elder women sit on the edges of platforms weaving or shaping clay. You hear someone beating a drum in one of the plazas where people gather to trade or to watch some ceremony unfold on a larger mound. The LiDAR shows terraces climbing the lower hills around the city cores. Those are not random scars. They are fields shaped to catch water coming down off the slopes without losing soil. Some hold crops. Some might be for tree orchards, the kind of managed forest you still see in some indigenous territories today where useful trees seem wild, but when you map them out, they line up along old paths and around old settlements. Most of the time, when people hear city, they picture stone, towers, walls, monumental architecture that does not care what the land wants to do. This Amazonian version is different. It is closer to a garden with hard edges. The main streets are raised so they stay passable through the rainy season. Drainage ditches run along some of them so that floodwater has a place to go that is not under your house. The big platforms are built on slightly higher ground so that even in heavy downpours, the centers stay dry. You live with the water instead of pretending it does not exist. The roads reach out of the cores like fingers. Some lead to smaller clusters of platforms that are probably farmsteads or satellite villages. Others go to places where the LiDAR shows big mounded complexes that might have been more ceremonial, or where local leaders lived, or where people gathered a few times a year from across the valley. You can picture those journeys. Families setting out at dawn, walking along well-used routes, stopping at ponds or streams, arriving at a plaza where hundreds of people are already there, fires going, music playing, the air thick with smoke and the smell of cooking. You can see the social layering in the layout, not in some modern high-rise versus slum division, but in subtler ways. Some platforms are much larger than others and sit closer to the central plazas. That usually means more status. Some clusters are tucked in rows along quieter streets, probably standard housing. The terraces that took the most work to build are closer to the core, the kind of land you give to people who have enough connections to claim the best fields. None of this is guessed from nothing. This is the same kind of pattern archaeologists read in stone cities all over the world, just written in earth instead of bricks. The mystery is not, did they build a city? It is, how many of these are out there and what happened to this one? Because the Upano Valley complex is just one window. Other LiDAR projects in Bolivia, in western Brazil, and in other parts of Amazonia are revealing similar stories in different flavors. Causeways, canal grids, ring villages, geometric earthworks. It is starting to look less like a weird exception and more like a regional habit, spread out urban life woven into managed forest and wetland. As for why this particular city faded, the honest answer is, we do not know. That is not as Hollywood is saying a huge disaster wiped it out, but it is more honest. There are a few clues. At some point, people stop rebuilding the houses on those platforms. The charcoal layers thin out. Pottery styles change or vanish. Pollen records in the area show shifts from more open, cultivated landscapes back toward denser forest. That could be climate adjusting, rivers changing course, soils getting tired in certain patches, political shifts where alliances broke down, or outside pressures we have not pinned down yet. By the time European invaders and their diseases started chewing through the continent, these specific streets were probably already quiet. Forest moved back in. Trees rooted in plaza floors, vines draped over old house sites. The last people who remembered the place as a living city would have died hundreds of years before the first Spanish chronicler ever looked down into this side of the Amazon. The incredible part is that even with 2,000 years of roots and rain, the plan is still there. The earth keeps the memory. You carve a street and a platform once, fill it, compact it, build on it again and again, and you leave a signature that even a jungle cannot erase. It just hides it under biomass. That is what the LiDAR is exposing. Not some magic new layer that was not there before, just the old human geometry that was never gone, only covered. There is another angle that does not get talked about enough. Local farmers and indigenous communities in that valley did not need a laser to know something was there. Generations of people have been finding old potsherds when they plant a new field, or noticing that certain hilltops are suspiciously flat, or telling stories about old ones who lived in the high ground. The big LiDAR reveal is mostly for outsiders. The people who live there now were already walking on those ghosts. What changes with the scans is that now someone in a distant capital sees a color image and suddenly cares. The danger is that this interest shows up just as the pressure on the land is ramping up. The same flat ground that was perfect for ancient cities is perfect for modern agriculture and ranching. Chainsaws and tractors do more damage in a season than a flood does in a decade. There are places in the Amazon where you can watch, in satellite time lapse, ancient earthworks go from protected forest to exposed in a new cattle pasture to almost erased under a plowed field in less than a human lifetime. Upano is under that kind of threat. Roads come in. Land gets cheaper when trees go down. New families arrive. If you clear a field with fire right on top of an old plaza, the LiDAR will still show you the ghost of that rectangle for a while, but the actual archaeological layers are being chewed up. Pottery gets crushed. Compact surfaces get ripped apart by plows. In a few years, the only record left will be the scan and the notes from the few pits the archaeologists had time to dig. So you get this strange feeling when you look at those images. On one hand, it is awe. A full ancient city grid under the rainforest, older than most of the famous sites we talk about in school, drawn in subtle differences in elevation that a computer can see better than your eyes. On the other hand, it is urgency, because you know the forest that protected that grid is being cut right now in some sections, and there is no guarantee that the law or political will is going to step in fast enough to save much of it. The bigger lesson is about how we tell the story of the Amazon at all. For years, the dominant idea was that this was a raw, untouched wilderness, and that indigenous people there lived in small, temporary camps with almost no impact. That story was very convenient if you wanted to roll in and say, look, no one is using this properly, let us fix it with ranches and mines. What these buried city grids say is something completely different. People have been engineering this place for a very long time. They did it with earthworks, roads, fields, orchards, controlled burns, and dark soils enriched over generations. They did it without covering everything in stone so the forest could grow back over their work. But the work is still there. The city in the Upano Valley is not just a cool hidden place. It is a piece of evidence in an argument about how flexible humans are. We build dense stone cities where climate and stone made that possible. We also built low, green cities in floodplains and rainforests using dirt and water as our bricks. If you only look for one type, you miss half the story. So the next time you see a shot of the Amazon from above and it looks like endless green, remember that under some of those trees there were straight streets and planned neighborhoods 2,000 years ago. People argued over where to put the plaza. They decided which way the main road should point. They figured out how to keep their houses dry in the rainy season. They raised kids there, buried relatives there, fell in love there, fought there. Then they walked away or were forced away, and the forest took the stage again.